This is Mike from Butternut Beehives, and we're going to talk about bees, and we're going to have you hear the latest buzz. Hi everybody, this is Mike Mihalic from Butternut Beehives, and we're back again this year for our third year, all about bees, honeybees, not any kind of bee, a honeybee. So we're going to do a quick review because a lot of you have probably been through this before. So we're going to talk about the most important bee in the hive, the queen bee. And here she is, you can see she's much bigger than the rest of the bees, and her job is to keep the hive running smoothly. She lays up to 2,000 eggs a day in the summertime, and that's a lot of babies being hatched, so there's a lot of bees here to take care of all those babies. And she also keeps everybody working by communicating through pheromones, so they all know what to do and when to do it. So the next important bee is the worker bee. Right here is the worker bee. The worker bee are all female bees, and they're the largest number of bees in the hive. You could have up to 80,000 worker bees in a beehive. That's a lot of buzzing going on, so you can hear them when you get close to the hive. Here's the worker bee, here's the cycle. The queen lays the egg, the larva hatches and grows, and it will pupate in the cell, and then it comes out a bee. And then the bee will gather nectar to make honey and pollen in their pollen baskets down here and bring it back, and that's their protein, and the honey is their carbohydrate. Then there's the drones. The drones are the male bees. There are not that many of them, relatively speaking. And the drone's job is to mate with the new queens that hatch that year when they swarm. So that's the only job they have. So, since we're doing this virtual this year, we can do some things a little different. I can't see all your smiling faces, which is disappointing, but we're going to get our jackets on, and we're going to get out to the bee yard, and we're going to show you some live hives, some brood, and bees making honey out in the yard. So let's get our suits on. If I can do this. We're going to get our smoker, and we're heading out to the bee yard. I'll see you there. Hi, this is Mike from Butternut Beehives. Now we are out in the bee yard. Today we're going through the bee boxes. It's early April, so the bees are building up quickly, getting ready for the honey flow. Also, they're thinking about swarming, so now is a very good time to make a split. And a split is to take some brood and some eggs from the main hive and put it in another box and let the worker bees make a new queen, and that's how you start a new hive. It's called a split, and you put it in a small box, which is called a nuke. So today we're going through the frames, and as you can see, we're pulling them out and we're looking for small larvae and eggs, and that's what we're going to put in the small box behind me. And then we'll take that home and we'll feed them, and hopefully if everything goes well, they'll make a new queen, she'll go out and mate, and we'll have a new hive. So by making a split and creating a new hive, it will remove some bees from the original hive, and hopefully they won't swarm. And what swarming is the bees will make new queen cells, and then the old bee will leave just before the new queen hatches with half the hive and go and find a new home. And that's how they make sure that they stay alive and they keep reproducing and making new hives. But when you're trying to get honey, you don't want them to swarm. You want them to stay in the box and make honey. So you make a new hive. So the other thing we're going to do to these hives while we're in here today is we're going to put in a mite treatment, a treatment to kill Verona mites. Verona mites will kill your beehive if you don't take care of them. So on the bottom box, we're going to put in a chemical called Formic Pro, which is a formic acid-based chemical that will kill the mites but not hurt the bees. Formic acid is found in the beehive naturally in lower volumes, so it's something that they're used to. Okay, this is what a smoker looks like. You open the lid, and I use pine wood. Some people use needles or other stuff. Just little pieces of wood. You put it in the bottom of the smoker, and I'd light it with a torch. And it gets really hot, and then I put a bunch more wood on top of it, so that wood that's not hot will actually cool the smoke down so the smoke won't burn the bees. And then you just puff it, and the smoke comes out, and it calms down the bees. And then when you're all done in the bee yard, if you don't have a cork, some people have cork, I just grab a little handful of grass and I wad it up and I stick it right in the top like that. And then that cuts off the airflow and it kills the fire, so it'll cool off and you're ready to go next time. Now you can see Christina is smoking the bees. What this does, it will drive them down into the box, so when we put the next box on top, we won't smash any bees, and it also calms the bees. It covers up their alarm pheromone, which keeps them from stinging. This is a perfect brood frame. You see the brown caps in the center, that's all capped brood. When it hatches out of there, it'll be a new bee, and they have honey in the corners of the frame so that they can feed the brood from right there. Hi, we're going to talk about bee frames today. This is a frame with a foundation, and the bees will build the wax out so it will look like this when they're done. And unfortunately, we do not have a honey frame here today, but they will fill every one of these little combs full of honey, and then they'll cap them with a little wax like right there on this here. And then when we pull this out and it's full of honey, it can weigh 6 pounds. Right now it's light like a feather, you can see. So then we'll take it back to the extracting room, and there's a couple of different ways you can uncap it. This is a new tool I got, and you just drag it across the frame like this, and as you can see, it just pulls the caps right off of the frame, and then you can put this in the extractor and the honey will come right out. This is a tried and true way that they've used for lots of years. It's an electric knife. You plug it in, it gets hot, and then you just melt the caps right off and they all fall right off. Now, if you're a really big beekeeper and you've got hundreds and hundreds of hives, you'd have a machine, you just drop it in and it'll just cut them off. But this is how we do it. This is a frame full of nectar. When it gets dry enough, it'll be honey and they'll cap it. So now we're installing a queen excluder on between the second and the third box on the honey hive. This keeps the queen from coming up into that third box and laying eggs. So, because that's where we're going to take our honey from. Everything down below they get to keep for the winter. Everything above is where we get our honey that we can extract. On this frame, if you look close, you can see eggs and tiny larvae down in the bottom of the cell. The little white dots or dashes are eggs and larvae. Right now, as you can see, we're taking our time and really looking at the frame because we want to find the queen and make sure that we leave the queen in the main hive and not put her in the nuke box. The queen is the biggest bee in the hive. When you see her, you'll recognize her. Her wings look really short because her abdomen is so long because she has all those eggs that she's storing up to lay. She lays about 2,000 eggs a day in the summertime. This is my bee suit. You can see you can see through it. That's good because it keeps you cool, but it's thick, so if a bee does try to sting you, he can't get you. And this is what goes over my head, and they call this a bee veil, and that protects your face when you're in the hive so that you don't get stung. But generally the bees aren't aggressive, especially if you use the smoker. It keeps them calm, but you can never be too sure, so you want to be careful when you're in the beehive. Okay, we've talked about honey and how we get it out of the frame with the extractor, and then you filter it and you put it in a jar, and everybody loves honey. I love honey. So that's the honey. The other thing you can get out of the beehive is wax, and this is all wax. All this comb is wax, and you can scrape that out and you can melt it down, and you can make candles, beeswax candles, or you can use beeswax in chapstick, and you can make beeswax chapstick. The other thing that you can get out of the beehive is called propolis, and they call it bee glue. They use it to stick everything together. There's a hole in the hive, they'll stick it, they'll cover the hive with it, and it's very antiseptic. Nothing grows on it, it kills germs, and the pharmaceutical companies actually use it in some of their medicines, I guess, and they'll buy it and use it, and people make tinctures out of it, and they say it's very healthy for you. I've never done anything with it, but just another product you can get out of the beehive. And the other thing you can get from the bees is pollen. You saw it earlier in the video, they had it in their basket on their legs, and they bring it back and they eat it. Well, some people actually collect some of the pollen and they eat it, and it's very good for you too, just like it's good for the bees. Almost a completely capped frame of honey. This side is about half capped.
Awesome. Difference in the color. Mr. Jesse, wasn't that such a cool program about honeybees?
That really was, Miss Christina. I enjoyed it a lot.
I learned so much. I had such a good time. Thank you for joining us. To close the program, we are going to read a really fun book called The Bee Man by Lori Krebs and Valerie Siss. And we're just going to have a whole lot of fun. We're just going to get right into it. We're going to read it together to you guys. Thanks for joining us today. Here is my grandpa, who's known in our town as the Bee Man. Can you see that?
Here is his jacket with zipped up hood that covers his face just the way that it should when he visits his hive as the bee man.
Here are his gloves made of cotton and leather, protecting his hands in all kinds of weather when he tends to his hive as the bee man. Look at his gloves. Isn't that cool?
Now we're in the woods, surrounded by hives. Here is the beehive where all the bees sleep, tucked into a box called a shallow or deep, and then placed on a stand by the bee man.
Here is the smoker. Remember we talked about the smoker that calms down the bees, and a hive tool that opens the beehive with ease. For a much closer look by the bee man. Ooh. Look at that
Now we're
page.
in the hive?
Yeah.
Okay. Here is the queen bee, who does her job well and lays tiny eggs in a 6-sided cell. She's the heart of the hive, says the bee man.
Bees. Here are the drone bees with big bulging eyes and a large appetite, supporting their size. They mate with the queen, adds the bee man. Look at all those bees. That's awesome.
Here are the workers, 10,000 or more, who gather the nectar and bring back and store in honeycomb cells for the bee man. I love the suits they wear.
Really awesome. Here are the house bees with swift-moving wings that dry up the nectar a worker bee brings, making honey for me and the bee man. Ooh, we talked about honey. That was
Now they're inside. Here's the extractor. It's clickety-clack, removing the honey from frames on its rack and filling up jars for the bee man.
Here is some of the honey returned to the hive. It's food for the bees to help them survive the long winter days near the bee man.
Here are the bees protected from harm, inside the hive, huddled snug and warm. So they'll be here next year, says the bee man.
Here is the wagon filled up to the brim with bottles of honey collected by him and brought to the house by the bee man.
And here are the muffins, all warm and delicious, and dripping with honey on Grandma's best dishes.